Hey everyone, thank you so much for being with us on this latest episode of the Charging Station. We're so grateful that you're with us on this broadcast. However it is that you might be checking it out, it could be video through YouTube, Facebook, any of our the app, or any of the opportunities that we have, or maybe you're listening to this on a podcast. We're just grateful that you have tuned in to be part of what it is that we're speaking, what God might be speaking to you as you renew your faith and charge your faith at this time in your life. I'm here with Pastor Tom, and we're doing this segment. Actually, Pastor Tom, we're finishing up our segment on Defy the Odds, and I think it's great that you are with us as our life group leader, and to be with us during this part of the journey. And we get to talk about how God's defied the odds in your life.
Yeah. It's been a really good series, Pastor.
And not only that, but this is our Thanksgiving episode. So I'm with Tom the turkey, and if I could with that. So it's just a great night, and whatever you're doing, we're just delighted that you're here. And so, Pastor Tom, thank you for your willingness to come in. And I know that it is often a very vulnerable place. To
Right.
be on the other side of me with this interview, really not knowing where we're going to go with it and what the Lord's going to speak. But thank you. Thank you for what you do for the kingdom. And we're not trying to make this a Thanksgiving theme, but it just flows naturally from who we are as believers in Christ. And I know the impact that you are making through the care ministry. I also know the impact that you're making in the life groups, helping to organize all of that. I also know that you're part of the prayer force that is happening in South Georgia. So he is part of a team that Monday through Friday from 9 to 9:30 meet together on the phone and pray over the needs of our state, our nation, our churches. And so thank you so much for what you're doing for the kingdom of God.
Well, thanks, Pastor. I am grateful for the opportunity to serve the Lord. So,
And do you find it amazing that that is what you're doing at this stage in your life?
yes.
Did you ever think that you would be a minister holding credentials and pastoring and doing the work of the kingdom?
No, I still question what they did. Every time I look at my credentials, which isn't often, but I'm like, what in the world were they thinking?
Yeah. Well, for you to even be at this place is kind of where I want us to go. And maybe we can come back to that and talk a little bit more about what you're involved with. But the fact that you are even saved
Yeah,
tells us that God defied the odds in your life.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Would it be safe to say that you may be even questioning why you're alive today?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've been in a couple accidents and spent time overseas, and it's a wonder I'm alive. Um,
Well, for that, it might answer a few questions.
yeah,
If,
yeah,
but I know in all seriousness, you still bear the scars.
I do.
And recently, you and I were just talking, as I often do, about just random things that don't seem to matter to anything. But we got on the issue of tattoos of all things. And the comment was made that I don't even know if you recognize what you say. And we're not talking a for or against or anything like that. We're just talking in general.
Right.
And you made the comment that I have enough marks on my body already,
Hmm.
meaning the scars that you carry with you.
Right.
Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, as a young jarhead, a young Marine, I was stationed in Okinawa, Japan, and actually joined up 6 months apart from my best friend in high school.
So you came out. I'm going to interrupt you right
Mhm.
there. So you came out of high school and didn't necessarily go the traditional college route or
Right,
anything like
right.
that. Did you join straight up
Straight
into
out
the
of high
Marine Corps?
school. Yeah, I was actually in the delayed entry program.
What does that mean?
So I joined up as a senior in high school,
Okay.
and all I was waiting to do is graduate, and then I would go off to boot camp. Actually graduated early, and my recruiter said, I got a spot open. Do you want to go? I was supposed to go in July after the traditional graduation,
Yeah.
and I went 2 weeks after I graduated in January.
Wow. So you would have just turned, if I've got my math straight, you would have just turned
Just turned 18.
18.
Yeah.
And so what made you, before we get to Okinawa and all that, but what made you want to join the Marine Corps, go into the military?
Uh, that's an interesting question. Probably, I had a desire to serve. I had a desire to be a Marine, more than anything. I grew up in Savannah. Savannah was filled with Army Rangers,
Hmm.
and we believe those were elite forces. But there was something about the Marine Corps that always attracted me to it. I don't know if it was the amphibious side of it, it was the sharp looking uniforms, or just the kind of places that they served. There was an appeal there.
Part of my story that a lot of people don't know is that the majority of my friends, it seemed like in high school, went into the Marine Corps. I don't know how many trips I made to Paris Island for graduations and different ceremonies like that, but and I was set at one time
Hmm.
of considering it, looking into it, and all that because of them. And I guess that's the power of praying parents that
Right.
said that, you know what, we know God's got something different for you. And
Yes.
I think I would have enjoyed the military. I have great respect for those who have served our nation. But the question that I have for you is, and not to fast forward, but here you are serving now.
Hmm.
And you talked about even as a 17-year-old wanting to serve. Has service been always part of your life, or do you think it was in your DNA, or do you think that God was setting you up for something even at a young age that you didn't know what was going on?
Looking back now, I see he was setting me up, because I would not say that service was part of my life. Um, I would say the opposite of that. I was pretty selfish,
Mm, mm,
and so I probably didn't see that at the time. Um, there was probably something inside of me, and it just needed to get birthed.
yeah.
And so I do enjoy it. And now, when I was a manager for a company in the secular world, I enjoyed working behind the scenes. I would rather serve in the back and make sure things were taken care of than be out front and be the one that everybody sees.
Yeah.
So there was that in there, but I just didn't see how it would come out.
I know the saying is that hindsight is 2020 and all of that, but even with you serving and going into the Marine Corps, God was doing something in your life that you probably didn't even recognize
Right.
and know that He was doing. And again, there's just something that as we're looking back as believers now, that we get to go back in our lives and see what God was doing.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love it to be able to go back and see that. And I think that's important for us to do, to go back and see how God was faithful in your life, even when you weren't
Yeah.
and I wasn't.
And we're talking about defying the odds, and I think that's where you're going. But obviously, you're setting us up for a story
Yeah.
yourself
Yeah.
about Okinawa being in Japan, 6 months ahead. I think you said of
Right.
your best friend in high school
Behind. Yeah.
behind.
Yeah.
So what was going on with that?
So we hooked up and we both bought, interestingly enough, I know you and Pastor Bobby are really into the bicycle riding.
Hmm.
And at one time in my life, I really was. And I had taken my first check and I bought an 18 speed Kuwahara
Mm,
racing bike.
yeah,
And it was not uncommon. Me and my friend would check out on the weekend and we'd ride all over Okinawa, and we would ride as fast as the trucks, even faster. And it was really a good
that's
time.
hilly terrain if I
It
remember right.
is. It is. It's mostly jungle type terrain, and also beautiful beaches. It's quite a place to visit. Um, Kind of a paradise type of
Yeah.
place. So, but he lived at a different place than I did, and so actually, I was going to his barracks to get him, and then we'd go off riding. And I left the gate and went downhill,
Hmm.
and I hit a guardrail. Actually, I was going pretty fast, and I got off the lip of a road,
Oof.
and I could not get, how those little skinny tires on the bicycles, and I couldn't get the tire back up on the road. End up hitting a rock or something, and it catapulted me into the guardrail, and I snapped my arm and broke my collarbone all at the same time. I couldn't even hold that up. And Pastor, I can tell you, I had my hand sitting on my stomach. I knew that because I could see it, but my hand felt like it was up in the air. And as I looked over to my arm, it was like it had been tied in a knot.
Mm,
It was really bad, and they came and got me and took me to the hospital. It took 4 people to set my arm,
mm, mm.
and I had to go through at least a full year of physical therapy. They put a rod in my bone from my shoulder all the way to my elbow. It was horrendous, and then another year of physical therapy after they took the rod out.
So, what does this do for you, for your morale, for your responsibilities in the core? How does that play into that
It
part of your
was
story?
very challenging because, like I said, I was just 18 years old when it happened, so I was just new into the Marine Corps, and now I'm faced with a physical challenge of being able to do what I want to be doing
Yeah,
and what I'm required to do.
right.
And so there were requirements lifted for me for a certain amount of time. I didn't have to do pull ups, for instance. I didn't have to do them for a year or so.
Yeah.
Uh, but after I trained and did physical therapy, I would go even further than that and wanted to get my body back to where I could do things. But I had to learn how to write again.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking is here
Yep.
here it is. This completely messed up, completely changed everything, but yet we see God before you even know God
Yes.
who is working on your behalf without you even really knowing that that's what's happening.
I had no idea, but I can definitely look back now and see that God was definitely looking out for me.
Yeah.
And there were other times, I mean, there were other times that where I was young and stupid. And you could just see a young Marine overseas. I did a lot of stupid things.
Yeah.
And
Hadn't been
God,
out of Savannah very long,
right.
very often, and then here you have the whole world and all the freedom and really the youth to do what you wanted.
That's right. That's right.
So we're talking about the scars. So you're still bearing the scars of that today.
I still do. Yes.
And what do you think when you look at those scars now?
I thank God. I thank God because I know that it could be much different.
Yeah.
But for the grace of God, there go I.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I could see myself in situations that it's a wonder. It really is a wonder that I made them out. I
Well,
made out of it.
the Corps ended up taking you from Japan over to the Middle East, I guess.
Yes.
And so
Eventually.
I can remember being in high school myself and watching the green tracers go across the screen when the Gulf War started with
Right.
Saddam Hussein and all of that. And so now you're working through and you're doing all of that. How old were you when that was going on? And what was it like for you to be in a wartime situation, far away from home, uncertain about what was going to go on?
Right. I was probably about 22, 23 during the war. And it was challenging. It was, I like to talk about this way. And as a Marine, you want to be in the fight. It's not like you train so that you could sit around and do nothing.
Mm,
So being there, it was not a bad thing. We wanted to be in the fight. We wanted to do things, but the problem is that there were a lot of times of not doing anything.
that's tough
And
right
I
there
once
too.
heard this wisdom that war is months and months of boredom separated by seconds of excitement.
Mm,
And that's the way it was. There were a lot of things that were happening, but they happened when you least expected them,
yeah.
and they happened at a time where it all happens right now, and then there's nothing.
Yeah.
So
We're there, and we're personal, just like you and I are having a conversation right now. Just forget about everybody that's listening. But and I know you're a Marine, and this cuts against the grain. But were there times that you were scared?
oh, absolutely, absolutely, and I I think it's not crazy to be scared
Mm-mm.
because you have to learn how to deal with that fear. And Pastor, you've been preaching about fear. I've heard you preach about fear a lot of times, and it's you move past the fear,
Yeah.
you do it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's what they teach you. And as a matter of fact, in the Marine Corps specifically, I don't know about other services, but we're trained to, when we go to the range and we shoot our weapons, we pull the targets. That means we're in the line of that fire when it comes down. So we are familiar with the way it sounds when a round goes off over your head. So we're familiar with that sound. So you're not necessarily in danger, but you know what it sounds like when a bullet comes past you.
Yeah.
So that's for a lot of reasons. One, you need to be familiar with what it sounds like when it's near and when it's not near,
Oh,
but you also are not going to run away when it happens. So that's why a lot of people run to the fight, not from the fight. And I think that goes into my walk with the Lord.
yeah. And that's really what I want to follow up this part with, is because during those times, even though your training's kicking in, you're doing all that, you're still fearful. As someone who was not a person of faith then,
Right.
where did you go? What did you do? I mean, I'm sure you may have had a knowledge of who God was, even though you didn't have a relationship. But how do you handle
That's
situations
right.
like that?
Uh, at that point in my life, I knew that there was a God. I just didn't serve him. I didn't claim to be a Christian. I didn't I didn't follow his ways or anything like that. So I just, when those times happened, and yes, I was frightened, um, not to the fear of incapacitated,
Yeah,
but I knew there was danger.
yeah,
Danger can, you know, that could be a good thing. It can keep you safe.
yeah, yeah.
But in this case, where I would go to in my mind would be just, I'm okay. I'm going to rely on my training. I'm going to rely on what happens. If it happens, it happens. I can't control what I can't control.
But were you prepared for eternity, or did you even think about
I
that?
didn't even think about it.
Does that scare you now, looking back?
I think it does, but it scares me as a perspective of a father and a grandfather.
Mm,
Not necessarily for myself, but how many youth today think just like that? I don't have to be concerned about eternity. Is that really something that I need to be concerned about? Yes, it absolutely is. But why is it so far from our minds at a young age? We feel invincible.
yeah.
And I think as a Marine, that's kind of that mentality that's trained in, is a sense of invincibility.
Maybe even to the point that if you lost someone who was in your unit or whatever,
Yeah,
yes, you grieved it, you mourned it, you experienced the loss, but maybe still didn't relate it to your life.
that's right. Right. We didn't make that association. It was too bad for them. Let's pick up and move on. You can grieve later.
Yeah.
So
Wow, this got deep pretty quick,
yeah,
like Pastor Tom. And so, obviously, we know that God in His mercy, we could probably spend the rest of the evening or the rest of the time of discussing this, about many times that you've seen God defy the odds in your life.
yeah.
Things that were heading in one direction, but God shifted them and moved them in another direction for you, and how He worked in all of that. But the greatest was when you experienced salvation,
Yes. Yes.
because for you, it wasn't necessarily a church function that you grew up in.
Right.
Instead, there was a Saul conversion. There was a Damascus Road experience for
Right.
you.
Right. Actually, there was, I spent time in church as a kid. I mean, I would go to church with friends or even relatives that would invite me. Uh, but honestly, it was kind of scary, especially the Pentecostal church I went to.
Yeah.
We can get kind of crazy sometimes.
Hmm.
But anyway, I remember, and Pastor, you know my story, and I had actually experienced separation and divorce, and was probably at a pretty low point in my life, and just questioning everything.
Yeah.
And for me, I would try to go and walk a lot in those days when I was trying to get my head clear and figure out things. And I remember that I was a pack a day smoker,
Mm.
and I had a friend who was a customer of mine who was a preacher, and he was always encouraging me. He never preached to me, never told me I had to get my life right. He just was always there with an encouraging word and a loving smile,
Hmm.
as a friend.
Hmm.
And I was out clearing my head, walking, and felt that desire just to say, you know what? I've had enough. I'm done.
So you're already, and it's often the way the Lord meets us at those lowest points, because I think that's those during those times. God is always there. Right now, no matter what you're facing, God is there.
Yeah.
It's just us recognizing and identifying that He's there. And
Yes.
oftentimes that comes in those lowest moments. So
Absolutely.
here you are at that place already experiencing that, and God is meeting you where you are.
Absolutely.
Alone, maybe.
Alone. Yes.
Because going through divorce, going through all this,
Right.
and then there you are.
Is this what my life has added up to? So in that moment, I cried out. I
Yeah.
said, Lord, I don't want to smoke anymore. I don't want to live my life like this anymore. I don't want to be the man that I am.
Oof.
And I said, I want to be a better man.
Yeah.
And I believe at that point, I was walking around the track, and I believe at that point, the Lord saved me.
Yeah.
I believe He answered and says, I've got you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there were subsequent instances where I continue to pray that way. I continue to say, Lord, I want to give you my heart.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be like the people that I grew up seeing
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
said one thing and did another thing.
Yeah. Well, you've since that time have certainly lived that out, and we have seen God. I don't want to keep beating this, but we've seen God defy the odds,
Yes.
even the odds with you being a minister. Here you are today, even though you've experienced the hurt and the pain of the different things in the past and maybe even decisions, but yet God is still using you for the kingdom. He hasn't given up on you. He is using you, and in the ways that I see Him is you're offering care to others. You're making sure that others have the same opportunities for the same experiences that you've had in Him.
Yeah.
And it really has a way of impacting our lives.
Thank you, Pastor. Because of divorce, because of having separation in my life, it makes me a very big advocate for marriage.
Yeah.
And so even as a minister in counseling, doing premarital counseling, I want to make sure that I do the best that I can for them.
Yeah.
And let them know that there are some major consequences for the decisions that you make in your life.
Yeah.
So don't go about them lightly.
Yeah. Well, it shows in what you do and how you serve us. And I guess on this episode of all the things that we could talk about being thankful for, what has come out to me during this time that we've shared together, as brief as it's been, is most importantly our gratitude for the salvation that we have in Jesus Christ.
Amen.
The fact that He doesn't give up on us, the fact that He meets us at the lowest points of our lives, and that He can redeem our past. He can give us a beautiful future. He can bless us in so many ways. And even the fact that we are serving in ministry together is such a privilege of mine. And I'm grateful that you are on the team and for being here, not just in the kingdom, but being part of the Bay Harbor family, and for everything that you do for us. And you, according to Scripture, are making sure that you care for others so that your faith does not become dull,
Yeah.
or you become indifferent towards the work that you're doing.
Right.
And you keep that vibrant, and we're grateful for you. And so as you enjoy your time and your season of whatever it is that God is doing in your life, look back at what He's done. Look at the impact that He's made in your life, and just know that He has something great in store for you. God bless you, and thank you for being with us.